Good morning. Welcome to Money Talks, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. I'm Brigida Lay, sitting in for Cathy Yang. In the headlines today, the MMDA insists that the odd-even scheme soon to be imposed on EDSA will reduce vehicles on the road by 40% despite public outrage. The Department of Agriculture is considering a gradual increase in rice import tariffs from the current 15%. And the local bourse crashed through the all-important 6,400 barrier as investors search for fresh catalysts and foreigners stuck to wait-and-see mode. Let's get to one of our top stories. First, on the first day of the 46th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. cut right to the chase and formalized the Philippines' call to urgently adopt a legally binding code of conduct in the South China Sea. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza reports.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. encouraged his fellow leaders of every member state in ASEAN to form a code of conduct in the South China Sea. He called for the conduct during his intervention in the 46th ASEAN plenary session in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This was after a Chinese vessel water-bombed a Philippine research vessel in Sandiki last week.
We underscore the urgent need to accelerate the adoption of a legally binding code of conduct in the South China Sea. This to safeguard maritime rights, promote stability, and prevent miscalculations at sea.
The president also expressed his support in ASEAN's position to not fight back against U.S. President Donald Trump's imposition of more tariffs to the region's imports. He said that this is important to avoid any retaliatory measures in tariffs. In April, Trump postponed the supposed 17% tariff on Philippine exports. The ASEAN chairman himself, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, is set to talk to Trump.
I've taken the liberty also to write to President Donald J. Trump to seek his understanding to organize a U.S.-ASEAN meeting, which means we observe seriously the spirit of centrality. It speaks not only to our aspirations, but to our obligations.
Mr. Marcos also underscored the importance of responding to climate change.
We urge ASEAN's partners to scale up predictable and accessible and adequate climate finance to enable ASEAN to realize its climate ambitions and safeguard the future of our communities.
In the ASEAN Youth Summit, he discussed the responsible usage of artificial intelligence or AI.
We must therefore equip our youth with digital resilience that will enable them to navigate online spaces with a critical lens and to use technology to amplify their voices and contributions to ASEAN's regional growth.
The president also held bilateral meetings with the state heads of Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. The two-day summit is expected to end today. The Philippines is set to host the 48th ASEAN Summit in 2026.
Well, speaking of ASEAN preps, the talk of the town overnight is the MMDA bringing back the odd-even scheme of the 90s in anticipation of the massive EDSA rehabilitation project that begins in June. Authorities insist it should reduce vehicles by some 40% on the road despite public outrage. Here's that story.
This is what EDSA rush hour looked like on Monday. Unlike before, there's fewer or almost no enforcers on the road. As of 4 p.m. May 26, MMDA estimated the number of violators of the No Contact Apprehension Policy, or NCAP, at almost 600. These motorists will receive citation tickets via their registered mail. MMDA is still working with telcos so violators could be advised via text as well. The agency is also working on fixing the app where motorists can immediately check for violations. The MMDA defends NCAP again as a mere money-making venture.
Wala po kami sa business ng panghuhuli. Ang panghuhuli po namin ay para po sa disiplina ng ating mga kababayan na dapat po sumunod sila sa traffic rules for safety and para po walang chaos sa kalsada.
Aside from NCAP's restart, The MMDA also announced the comeback of the odd-even scheme, which will be implemented 24/7. Vehicles with plates ending in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 would be prohibited on EDSA on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, while those whose plates end in 0 and even numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8 are banned on the major thoroughfare every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. There will be no restrictions on Sundays, while electric and hybrid vehicles are exempted from the scheme, which will have a one-week dry run that starts on June 16. There are no fines yet during the trial run. Already, motorists have qualms over the odd-even scheme.
Minsan kasi hirap din no? Kasi mayayaman talaga. Pwede ang resolution lang, bibili ng bagong kotse.
Medyo hassle din talaga pag mag-commute ka kasi magastos. Tapos mainit.
Meantime, the DOTR is still negotiating with San Miguel Corporation to allow free passage to parts of Skyway Stage 3, which will serve as an alternate route when the EDSA rebuild begins.
Ina-expect po natin na kung maglilibre uli yung Skyway, ay makaka-reduce po tayo ng between 10 to 20% volume sa EDSA. Kung sasamahan po yan ng ad-even scheme na additional 40%, ina-expect po natin na mas bibilis po yung daloy ng traffic at hindi po magkakaroon ng Carmageddon.
At the moment, EDSA busway is still fully operational, with DOTR even ordering additional 100 bus units to ply it on a regular basis. The Transportation Department is also looking at additional trains at the MRT and the removal of X-ray scanners in the train line so passengers can load quicker. When EDSA's major makeover kicks off on June 13, the first 2 weeks will be for preparation, where DPWH will preposition equipment and barriers. After that, excavations will begin. First to be affected will be the busway along the stretch of Pasay to Guadalupe and along Caloocan. Authorities hope the entire busway southbound will be done by end of year.
Pagka natapos natin itong rehabilitation ng EDSA, we can guarantee you that it will be a very smooth ride.
The 8.7 billion peso rehab of EDSA is expected to finish by 2027.
The Department of Agriculture is considering a gradual increase in rice tariffs by the next harvest season. But Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel says the current 15% will remain until the end of the second quarter to keep rice prices stable. The next harvest season is around October. Yesterday, agriculture officials were in Bulacan after farmers there complained that they were being shortchanged. In some parts of the province, the price of a kilo of palay went down to as low as 11 pesos and 50 centavos. They said the correct price should be 19 pesos. With this, Tiu Laurel says the Agriculture Department is seriously considering setting a floor price for palay before the next harvest season.
In the rule of yung tinatawag na supply and demand, kung maraming demand, dapat mas mataas ang presyo. So, ang ibig sabihin sa naririnig ko sa sinasabi mo, nag-uusap-usap yung mga loko ngayon. Naghahanap kami ng legal avenues para ma-implement ito if possible. Kailangan din yung lahat ng retailers at traders ay kailangan by law is mag-register sa NFA para nga natin makontrol lahat sila. Bulag kami sa NFA kung sino-sino mga ito No, parang it's a cat and mouse game kasi by law hindi na required. So kailangan yun na yung regulatory powers ng NFA kailangan may balik.
In the markets now, the euro hit a one-month high against the US dollar and global markets climbed after US President Donald Trump delayed the 50% tariff threat on the European Union. The two sides say they're now fast-tracking trade negotiations, but it remains unclear when or if a deal may be reached. The U.S. has sent a list of demands, including value-added tax, EU food safety standards, and national digital services taxes. It also wants more manufacturing, like steel and semiconductors, moved back to the U.S. However, the EU said many of those are beyond its control and that it would not simply adopt U.S. standards. The U.S. has given the EU until July 9th before rolling out 50% tariffs. Off the back of that, the central bank cautions that monetary policy alone may not be enough to shield the economy from the effects of trade shocks. BSP Deputy Governor Zeno Ronald Abinoja said that unlike typical supply disruptions, trade shocks have deeper and more persistent impacts. With this, he emphasized that broader and coordinated strategies, including updated models and frameworks, would indeed help. BSP Governor Eli Remolona Jr. has indicated the possibility of 2 additional 25 basis point rate cuts this year, shoring up the markets. The Treasury has raised more money than planned in its latest auction. A total of 28.6 billion pesos were awarded. That's higher than the initial 25 billion peso offer. And that's all thanks to strong demand from investors. Interest rates on all tenors went down, with the 91-day T-bill averaging 5.47%, the 182-day at 5.55%, and the 364-day at 5.69%. Analysts say the lower rates reflect market expectations that the central bank may cut interest rates further this year. In corporate news, PLDT says it's banking on its enterprise segment to drive growth and amid increasing demand for digital solutions. Senior Vice President Patricio Pineda highlighted the company's strong position to meet emerging customer needs, citing its comprehensive ICT offerings and robust data center capabilities. In the first quarter, PLDT's enterprise revenues reached 11.9 billion, or just shy of 12 billion pesos, fueled by sustained demand for connectivity. PLDT and Signal TV, of course, the owner of this channel, are part of the MVP group. You are watching Money Talks. We're going to pause for a quick break. Coming right up, we'll take a closer look at global markets and a conversation with equity analyst Jaconia Nicolas. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Regina Lay. Let's take a quick look now at the markets. Of course, U.S. markets were closed yesterday in observance of the Memorial Day holiday, but we can take a closer look at U.S. futures. Slight movements as U.S. markets open later tonight, Manila time. Okay, finally, a sea of green. We're looking at about a 1% jump for all major indices in the U.S. That's the Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the NASDAQ. There's getting U.S. markets, of course, we're talking about thinner trading volumes. As I just said, we're coming off the back of the Memorial Day holiday. Also, there was a public holiday in Britain, so trading volumes in the past 24 hours have been thinner. There is a positive catalyst, though, and that is the delay of the 50% EU tariffs that the Trump administration has granted to the EU after European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen appealed to the U.S. president. Both sides say talks are now on the fast track, although again they have not committed to a timeline at the moment. A lot of traders saying it is still very much a sell the dollar story, given all the uncertainty of the U.S. Policy at the moment. As for Asian markets, as of 9:30 at the open, let's see. A bit of a mixed bag there with the ASX 200, Australia's ASX 200. Just up very marginally to around 8,300 over there. South Korea's Kospi down also marginally, and the Nikkei more or less flat. Japan's stock indices, though, have been seeing some positive movement upwards. It's getting a boost from the Trump administration's approval of Nippon Steel's takeover of U.S. Steel, something that the previous administration of Joe Biden had blocked. In China and the UK, China and Hong Kong, we're seeing a lot of declines across tech. Apple suppliers there are under pressure as they face the threat of additional tariffs on their end. Philippine markets now, if we can take a closer look. Oh, well, the big story there, Philippine Stock Exchange has, the Philippine Stock Index, the PSEI, broke through the all-important 6,400 barrier yesterday. That's Monday, May 26, closing at about 63.87. Was that 63.87 or 63.97? 63.89.94. Investors really looking for fresh catalysts there, but not finding much more, and a lot of investors on wait-and-see mode as well. Around 4.7 billion pesos changed hands, but the index remained largely in red the entire day, and finally falling through that 6,400 level sometime around midday, and was just unable to gain any ground after midday. Philippine peso, though, let's take a look. Opening today, ever so slightly stronger at sitting at 55.35 to the dollar at the moment. But as I just said, traders say that it's still very much a sell the dollar kind of a story, which means that the peso is not necessarily strengthening, but it's more the dollar that's losing ground. The peso actually closed yesterday slightly weaker at 55.42 against the greenback. A lot of the traders we've spoken to expecting the currency to hold within those range in the next several weeks, again, for lack of a strong positive or negative catalyst. Okay, let's break down all of those now. We've got Jekanaya Nicholas. He's an equity analyst at First Resources Management and Securities Corporation. Welcome, Jeko, to the set. It's your first time on the set, so we're happy to have you here. As I said, top story, PSEI broke through the 6,400 level. That's a pretty significant move. Is there any fresh catalyst to look forward to? What are you telling your investors?
So as of now, we don't actually have a fresh catalyst. However, the PSEI, we think that the PSEI will try to build a support at the 6,300 level. So because when we look at the PSEI, actually during January, it was in a bullish divergence, which shows that the PSEI will start to recover. And fortunately, the favorable inflation rate and the favorable interest rate cut by the BSP has led to a almost 4 weeks increase in the PCI. So the recent 2-week decline is actually, we're not actually surprised by it because we already expect it.
I was just going to say, actually, the economic indicators have not been bad. Inflation is very much tame right now, 1.8% in April. You've got the prospect of potentially 2 more rate cuts later in the year, so that should give markets a boost. But what's causing this pessimism? Is that just spillover from the rest of the region?
Yeah, I think during the past few weeks, especially last week, Japan recently released a disappointing PMI and export data, in which in turn has investors worried as they think that maybe the Trump's aggressive tariff has already taken a toll in the global economic growth. However, on the other hand, we think that the Philippine economy is not that affected by these global woes, as our export industry is not as big as other countries, such as Japan.
Yeah, it's still largely domestic consumer-driven story. Let's drill down into specific sectors. What's looking like a good bargain to you? What's looking cheap?
So for now, we think that the holdings sector is actually showing a bullish divergence. So
holding sector.
Okay. So if you look at the holding sector, comparing it to the PSEI, the holding sector actually has sustained itself above the 100-day EMA compared to PSEI that is recently trading around the 50 EMA. So it's one of the, on a technical perspective, we are bullish on it. And also, as a consumer-driven economy, as you've said earlier, holdings companies such as SM, which are mostly, its businesses are mostly consumer-driven businesses, in which we think that they will benefit the most from the robust consumer industry or sector that we have.
So it sounds like the story there is still diversification. The more diversified the revenue streams of a company, the better they're standing.
Yeah, especially if those companies are consumer-driven companies.
But what about for your clients, though? How do you advise them to diversify their portfolios? What else is there to look at?
So in terms of diversifying, we are giving them we are recommending them to buy the undervalued stocks, of course. And in terms of the industries, we recommend banks. As we all know, during the past few months, banks has been the apple of the eye of the investors in the PSE. And of course, we are also looking on potential laggards such as the holding sector and consumer industry in specific, because the recent lower than expected inflation has already will greatly affect these consumer companies.
Oh, the banks, they're turning in record profits, which is amazing. Are we expecting this to continue even with the rate cuts?
Yeah, actually, we think that even though there is a interest rate cut, which will eventually maybe somehow contract their margins, we expect the loan growth or the growth of loans to eventually somehow mitigate that decrease in margins.
But still, on the whole, net earnings should be okay?
Yeah, I think the net earnings will still be okay.
What do you think of utilities?
As of now, utilities actually, if you look at the utility companies, utility sector, they actually are one of those companies that actually increased despite of the global woes. As of now, utility sector or companies are now consolidating, in which we think we still have a buy signal for these companies.
Oh, you're still on buy for utilities?
Yeah, we still think that.
What have you got to sell on at the moment?
So we don't have a specific sell. However, we are really cautious on the property segment, of course. Even though that they are undervalued, I think the negative sentiment, as you can see on the technicals of these stocks, are actually sour and not that good looking due to the recent condo oversupply.
The condo oversupply, depending on which research firm you use, is running at least 2 to 3 years at the moment. We're not expecting any of that to change anytime soon. So that's the only reason you're a little bit bearish on properties. But in terms of fresh catalysts, we were just talking at the top of the hour about the lack of fresh catalysts. What is there to look forward to for investors?
For investors, of course, number one, we think that any tariff agreement or any positive tariff progress will benefit the market.
Even if you mean between the U.S. and EU?
U.S. and other economies, especially
it doesn't,
China.
Any other country,
it could potentially boost the market. Second, we also think that the incoming economic data that will be released in June. The inflation data will be crucial because it will be the it will help the BSP to navigate on as to whether or not they should continue cutting interest rate.
Finally, Jeko, your forecast for the benchmark index?
So for the benchmark index, so our forecast is at 6,800 to 7,000 level. So it's
by the end of the year.
By the end of the year.
Okay.
So it may not be as bullish as others forecast due to the uncertainties. So we don't expect a raging bull anytime soon.
It's not as bullish, but it's still it's still a long ways away.
Yeah.
You're positive we can get there.
Positive.
Okay, fantastic. We'll leave that there. Thank you so much for your time today, Chikanai and Nicholas of First
Pleasure to be
Resources. We hope to help you be back. First Resources Management and Securities. We're going to pause for a quick break again, but right up next, King Charles is in Canada to open Parliament. This and more news from around the world. Keep it here on One News. You are watching Money Talks. Welcome back. Let's take a look at the headlines from around the globe now. Police have arrested a 53-year-old man in Liverpool, England, believed to be the driver of the vehicle that hit pedestrians during a trophy parade of football fans just overnight. At least 27 were hospitalized, including 4 children. Authorities said that the incident is isolated and it's not being treated as an act of terrorism. Ukraine says Russia launched its biggest drone attack yet on the country. Russian forces launched a barrage of over 300 drones and missiles in Ukraine over the weekend, killing at least 12 people. On a social media post, U.S. President Donald Trump says Russian President Vladimir Putin has quote-unquote gone absolutely crazy. And in Canada, King Charles is set to open Ottawa's parliament. It is the first time for a British monarch to do so since the late Queen Elizabeth did it 68 years ago. King Charles met Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney Jr. on Monday, showing a highly symbolic visit for supporting the nation. Okay, and that's all we have for Money Talks. I'm Regina Lay, sitting in for Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. here on One News. Have a great day ahead.